Hey, welcome back to It's Real. Happy Thursday to you. So glad to be bringing our podcast to you. Remember, this podcast, It's Real, is about real people, real issues, and coming together to have real conversation. Just so glad to have our cast with us today. I want to welcome Hayden Bosich with us. Welcome, Hayden. Andrea Benner, she's with us. And we've got the Blues Brothers. We've got Bill Davis and Steve Young. Don't know if they're the Blues Brothers, the Music Men, or, somehow like in this analog world. They're making a joke on me, suck, in the digital world, but analog guys. They're going to be bringing the music and the lyrics to us. Just want to introduce this topic today. This is episode 4. It's hard to believe. The 3 weeks have kind of flown by. And today's topic, guys, is really about maintaining our focus throughout the day. This relates to all ages. Sometimes, we go through our day and maybe we don't realize that we're really engaging in activities that might be robbing us of a little bit of our energy later in the day. And I don't know about you, and I'm sure that everybody that's tuning in, I could really use all the energy I can get at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm always looking at these kids at church on Sunday bouncing off the walls with all this energy, just saying, how can I, tap into some of that? Yeah, right. So anyhow, we're going to be talking about maintaining focus, but really, this concept within kind of psychology worlds, but from a very, a neuroscience background of consumption versus production, and really as it relates to dopamine and how our brain functions and what that dopamine does to kind of give us a feel-good shot, but maybe how some of those things that we're consuming in are superficial and rob us and deplete us of that storehouse and then leave us feeling a little tired in the end. And we're going to tether some scripture to this as well. But we're going to start in on the topic, and remember, we've got 10 minutes on the time clock. We'll go into a little bit of overtime. This is just to hold us somewhat accountable so that we don't ramble. Before we get going, I've got some beans here, some Bush Best Original beans, some Del Monte fresh cut French style green beans. No, the beans don't have any significance into the topic other than we had 2 young families, cute kids, still wagons and the Hildies, brought this mission idea and says, hey, we think that we ought to bring in some non-perishable goods to help those less fortunate in the community. They built a box, and people have been bringing food in here like crazy, and we're getting it into the hands of people who need it. So want to give a big shout out to them and to that little mission. Okay, so bring in your goods. Also, cups. Mindful Mug's going to be open, and I'm looking at an espresso machine, coolers, cabinets are being built. Remember, bring in your cups, and we'll feature them here on the show. Then they'll go to the Mindful Mug, and you can come in and drink out of your cup that you donated to the program. Okay, all right. Time starts now. Okay. So I want to throw this out, and Hayden, you're really passionate about this topic and kind of about dopamine and how it affects us and where the rubber meets the road in everyday life, whether it's scrolling or addictions. What do you have for us?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is we're in a very stimulated world, and it's at your fingertips at all times, whether yeah, there you go. You got the notifications at any given time. You can, I think a lot of people in my generation struggle with this a lot. It's like there's always this urge to pick up the phone. It's difficult to just be still and just be with yourself and be with your own thoughts. So I think the best, just because of dopamine's relationship to this, I think the best place to start is just kind of understanding what it is, what its functions are, and then, where we get it from. So dopamine in the brain is essentially just this chemical messenger that we use, and it's often referred to as the feel-good chemical or the feel-good hormone. You hear that talked about a lot. And its main role is in serving us as a reward mechanism for essentially performing tasks tasks and for creating and for surviving. So when we look at dopamine, I think it's not as black and white as this might portray it as, but we can look at things as like short term and highly dopaminergic, which means we go and we engage with this activity, we get a lot of dopamine from it right away. And then we can look at stuff that might be more long term, where I have a goal behind this. I might be working on this task at work, and I'm going to get dopamine after performing sustained activity for a long period of time. So within those things, like in the short term dopamine, you look at things such as scrolling. You might look at things such as consuming sugary foods. That can become a very addictive behavior for some.
Yeah, and listen, and addictions are huge, right?
Sure
I mean, a lot of
yeah.
people suffer with them, and we got to be mindful of that, right? Is people are trying to be aware and very intentional about game plans, right? To kind of to combat.
You have to. I mean, you've got to be aware, and in addition to being aware, you have to make it happen.
Yeah.
So when it comes to addiction, I found myself engaging in the same addictive behaviors throughout my adult life, and not realizing that's what I was doing. That I was addicted. My addiction was alcohol, but I always engaged in the activities that I thought alcohol could cure.
Yeah.
And just I got the rush from it. I was always seeking the buzz, in search of the buzz, and that's what I got. I got temporary relief.
Yeah.
And
that's what I was going to go with. Is so this whole notion of realizing that when we engage in that it's kind of superficial, right? It's very right away, big dose, but then it fleets and it's not sustained.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one thing you could probably, in reflecting on that is when you engage in those activities that give you a lot of dopamine right away, if you engage in that earlier in the day, where you do that before wanting to do something else, you might find yourself more tired. So an example of that might be on a Saturday morning, now I'm not saying on Saturday mornings we can enjoy ourselves and have a nice relaxing Saturday, but on Saturday morning, if we wake up in the morning, we scroll on our phone and we might, play video games for 3 or 4 hours. You're not really going to have any motivation to do anything later in the day, because you just drained kind of like this reserve of dopamine that you had really quick. So now your ability to access it later in the day becomes more difficult.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, this whole notion, the fable of the tortoise and the hare, right? What wins the race? Is it these short, bursts that I'm going to go hammer down and engage in these things? But is it the slow, steady race of kind of discipline is what I'm getting at? And that's what it comes back to a lot of. I mean, having 3 kids at home, I know that the pull and the temptation is in a digital world. I mean, whether it's video games or whatnot, and some of that to an extent is okay. I could remember growing up in the age the phones were not as prevalent. I was just through high school and into college when they came in, but certainly video games were big through high school, but not near what they are with today's kids.
Carve out time for it.
Yeah.
Like, especially with my rate, specifically in the morning.
Yeah.
So you have to be like, okay, we go outside with the basketball and these things, and then you can have it.
Well, and a good example of that, like if you're a kid in high school, and you might have, if you're playing sports or whatever, you have homework on top of that. Well, an example of that whole dopamine thing that we kind of pull from is if I come home and I go play video games, I'm not really going to have motivation to do homework because I'm just oriented myself from getting that fixed right away instead of having to do a sustained effort behavior where I'm studying and it's going to take me an hour and a half or 2 hours to kind of get that release of dopamine. as opposed to getting it right now. Yes, yeah.
Like all things are permissible, but are they all profitable to a point? How far can we take that?
Yeah.
Sure.
It's balance, right? And that's where I want to interject the scripture, John 10:10, right? We gotta realize we're in a spiritual battle in the world, and the force of evil is looking to use whatever they can to get us off that balance. And that's down at the bottom of the ticker, John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full.
Right.
And I think what we're trying to get in this balance is that how do we live full, purpose-driven, content lives where we feel our best. Doesn't mean that we're going to make every right decision, but even in the midst of the adversity, how do we take a step back, regroup, and then instead of trying to reach out for something false to fill that happiness, how do we look for something that's going to be fulfilling?
Charlie Kirk, in some of the book that I read, with Stop in the Name of God, he mentions this, all this stuff we're talking about right now, and how it's kind of controlling our lives, so we got to get back to it. We had a friend that wanted me to claim a day for the Sabbath. He says, I don't have time. And he goes, but I realized that I did when I got everything in control.
Yeah. Sabbath is huge in this and how we spend it, right? And spending time with the family and, taking walks, enjoying nature, constructive things.
Hayden, it strikes me as you were talking that the internet exposed generation has many different temptations to overcome, because as you said there, if you wake up and play video games, that's one. But how does the need of an individual, if they're done with their video games, go to their phone and scroll through who's texting them, right? I mean, is that do you think that releases dopamine as you go in and look for messages?
So you're talking just in the world of texting?
Facebook.
Yeah, I think all of it. Well, one thing I would say here is dopamine is involved with our socialization, so we do get dopamine from communicating with others. But I would say, when you get into the world of the phones and all the attention that you get from the different social media profiles, I think you want to, in the context of dopamine, think more about the short form content. So, everything now is like, there's like a 15-second clip of something or whatever, and it's gonna draw your attention right away. And then you go to the next one, and then it gives you that hit. And then you go to the next one, and it gives you that hit. Well, that doesn't actually mirror when we talk about like living a purpose-driven life. That doesn't fit in, or that type of behavior, continuously taking part in that behavior, doesn't fit in with, okay, I have a long-term goal and it's going to take me a long time to hit this.
We're good. Yeah, we'll go into overtime. Go ahead.
Right.
Old
So
overtime.
I think a good framework here is if you have a long-term goal, right, and there might be 5 or 6 challenges you have to hit in order to get there, right, and this might take 2 months to accomplish. So we're going to get that dopamine release very slowly as we complete all those tasks and then get it at the end. So all I'm kind of trying to say here with this is, we talked about this in the beginning a little bit with like awareness. I think just being aware of where we're placing our attention and where it might be controlling us. So if we struggle with scrolling on our phone, I don't think we should sit here and judge ourselves as like, oh, I'm like all messed up because I'm scrolling on my phone all the time. I think the first step is just build awareness around it and understand how it's affecting you, and then slowly beginning to pull back on that, and then slowly realizing the benefits of it.
Gotcha.
How would you with your kids?
Well, there's actually on your phone, well, specifically me as a parent on my children, you can do it on your own phone. You can moderate all of that.
Yeah.
You can set limits, like say, you can say, okay, 30 minutes of YouTube and then the app turns off. You can say any social media specific, just the phone in general. I have timers set on my phone.
That's
So-
good.
So if they want it to be in the morning, I mean, it isn't beneficial as he's saying,
Well,
but
here,
if they
I'll-
want, then they're done.
I'll
you
interject
know?
here because I have a similar comparison with that. So I set timers on like my Instagram or whatever.
Yeah.
So I get to 15 minutes. But when you start setting the timer, there's this little thing that comes up and it says, remind me again in 15 minutes.
Mm.
So you have this urge to like hit remind me in 15
Yeah,
minutes.
there you go.
Kind of like our clock, right? 10 minutes, remind me again in 10 minutes, right? This can go on and on.
Yeah.
But listen, couple things, right? Couple things. One is we talk about desensitizing. We not only sometimes desensitize ourselves, but our relationships become desensitized. You know what I'm saying? Like, at the very core of it. And then there was another thought that I had in something that was that, hey, where you were bringing up about these little 15-second increments, right? We got to realize that we live in a programmed world, and a lot of those things that come into our feed, somebody's trying to program their message or whatever, their content into us, and they want us to become very sensitized to wherever they're pushing and pulling. And sometimes we got to create that boundary and ask ourselves, hey, do we realize the bigger picture here and what's going on, right?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing I have this written down here, and I'm looking at the back of this can right now, and I'm seeing the added sugar on here. It's just kind of like a bunch of beans. But
Here, let me-
what I'm saying relates to that in a way. When you get into like the news and social media and advertising, like the people that work for these companies know all this stuff about the dopamine circuitry and all this stuff. So they're programming this stuff to make you addicted. And then I look at the food too. It's like we have so much sugar and all this stuff where we don't have to have sugar. And all of it continues to give you these hits right away. And it's like, it's literally everywhere you look.
Yeah.
It's quite literally
Hey,
everywhere.
you don't happen to have an Oreo cookie, do you?
I don't.
But it's so true, because it is, it just keeps you in. So, yeah, one more, I want to hit this other scripture, right? Because it kind of ties this up a little bit from Isaiah 55, verse 2. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your earnings for that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food. So what is true? Give us, Lord, our daily bread. Lord, give us the relationships. Give us the things that sustain us, the fulfillment, that give us purpose, that give us meaning, right? So as we kind of, rally around, I mean, we're not hitting the rewind button. We live in a digital, social world. And with AI coming on, hold on. Cryptocurrency, hold on. It's here. But how do we always tether back to purpose and to what gives us the baseline? Music.
Yes, sir. For this podcast, we're going to go into Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones from their
1965 album, Out of Our Heads.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I think there's a real connection between satisfaction and what we were talking about today.
Yeah.
And I'd like to share maybe my thoughts on the lyrics.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so in the song, there's a lyric that goes, when I'm watching my TV and a man comes on and tells me how white my shirts can be, but he can't be a man because he don't smoke the same cigarette as me. Now, for our generation, TV was our addiction. That's all we had. And we are very susceptible to TV commercials. And I can remember as a kid, the Marlboro Man. I don't know if you remember the Marlboro Man. It's like a very rugged cowboy-looking guy, and he smoked Marlboro cigarettes. And what that was telegraphing to us was, look, you can't be a man unless you smoke Marlboro cigarettes, because the Marlboro Man is a man and he smokes Marlboro cigarettes. And you see how that seems to me they're connecting addictions. you're addicted to the TV, and then because you're addicted to the TV, companies were advertising addictive products.
Yeah.
And they were really telling you how you were going to be if you
Just switch platforms.
And yeah, and because, now it's the whole argument that's happening at the federal level on the susceptibility of, and I shouldn't say susceptibility, but the companies, if they're going to be liable for the addictions within social media platforms that they're really, pushing these kids towards. So it's almost becomes, right, whether it's the Marlboro Man or if it's, the Meta platforms.
Right.
Right? We gotta be on guard against it.
But it's all meant to keep you consuming. It's all meant to keep you coming back. And that's just, it's all in profit too. Which is a very scary thing because we grind all this other stuff.
Yeah.
That was back then, it's right now.
Yep.
We need a higher level.
So we just gotta keep, encouraging one another and, and realize, be aware and invest in the things that last.
You focus.
Keep focused, right? All right. Well, listen, this wraps it up, okay? We'll be on next Thursday, 3 p.m. We're so glad you joined us. Remember, the Mindful Month's coming soon. Remember, until next time, love God and love others.